From our London office, I'm Kyle Hannan, and this is a special update episode of Go Beyond Disruption. It's a podcast from AICPA and CIMA, together as the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. You can find out more at aicpa.org and cimaglobal.com. First off, thank you so much for keeping us in your podcast list. And if you've been wondering where we've been since our last update toward the end of last year, 2021, is it really that far back? The answer is yes. The good news is that you're about to find out what we've been up to and what we'll be doing next. That is what I'm here for. And speaking of looking at what's ahead for this podcast, I'm joined by a new voice from just over the water.
Thanks, Kyle. My name's Kevin Gormley, and I am based in Northern Ireland, as you can probably tell. I'm here to talk about the Finance Leadership Programme today, and I'm delighted to be part of the podcast.
That's a voice that we'll be hearing a lot more of. Tell us a little bit about how you came to be working with the Finance Leadership Programme.
Yeah, so I come from a career in technology and computing, essentially. So I did a degree in business and then went to work for various high technology research companies and then software. And then in 2013, I joined the association looking after the Ireland sales team and joined the Finance Leadership Programme team back last year because obviously it's a fantastic new way to get CGMA qualified. And we rolled this out in Ireland last year, hugely successful. And I was so impressed by it that I joined the team.
And for those who may have heard of various accounting certifications and qualifications, just remind us what the CGMA actually is and where it kind of fits in with the accounting profession.
So CGMA stands for the Chartered Global Management Accountant. It's a global designation that effectively you receive upon completion of the CIMA qualification. It is obviously focuses in the management accounting space and is highly sought after by any employer across the globe. It's a highly prestigious designation that will be fairly well thought of by most employers.
So where does this FLP, the Finance Leadership Programme, fit into all of that?
So Finance Leadership Programme is essentially a pathway to get your CGMA designation. So if you think about the routes that you may take to study and learn, this is essentially one of the options open to students. So for example, in the UK, you will have 3 routes available from the 6th of September this year. First one will be your traditional professional qualification route, where students will be familiar with the process of signing up to be a student, purchasing tuition and learning support, taking a series of exams and progressing through the 3 levels of the qualification. You'll also have the option to do an apprenticeship, which effectively is a different version of this, where the students in question will learn while they work, take the qualification with the various exams and move through to completion. And then with FLP that accompanies the other 2 pathways, this basically is a digital pathway with everything you need from one single platform that's turnkey and is the same globally for every student that uses this pathway to get qualified. So it uses essentially a different assessment and a learning approach, but it includes for the first time from CIMA all the tuition and all the learning needed to be successful in the case study exams that you will sit as part of the qualification.
This Finance Leadership Programme is a new innovative development in how people get into this profession. As it changes, so do the routes to that professional qualification change. Now, of course, this programme is going to be a big part of this podcast in future. And before we find out a bit more about that, and what's coming up, let's just talk about where we have been since we last spoke to you, dear audience, in October last year. Since then, we did say that the Go Beyond Disruption podcast would be back. We clearly are. And we have been quiet for a while because of the fact that with the post-pandemic changes that have been going on, we've decided that some of the things that we were focused on when we first launched the podcast, we're almost at 250,000 downloads, which is quite something. But we realized that things have changed, and that's why we're changing too. So this podcast will be transforming from September. You as podcast subscriber or follower, you will see the artwork of our podcast change to reflect the new name of the podcast. And Kevin, perhaps you could tell us what that podcast is going to be.
Well, the podcast will be called the Finance Leadership Podcast. Obviously, a very simple name, because obviously we see this route and this pathway to the qualification as an integral part of the future of learning. As you mentioned, Kyle, the learners and the innovation that's sort of in our DNA at the association is very important. And I think this just epitomizes the future of what our future students expect and how they want to learn through this platform.
So this podcast from September will become the FLP, the Finance Leadership Podcast. And as Kevin has hinted, a lot of the guests that we've had in the past will be some of the same type of level professionals that we'll be having in the future. But there will also be some changes. Kevin, could you get a sense of who we'll be talking to?
Sure. So in the future, we will target the podcast for a number of listening groups. So obviously, our students that are currently on the Finance Leadership program, for those students who maybe are thinking about transferring across or starting the program in the future or near future. Also, employers who are trying to find out something more about FLP, how it could work for their business, and obviously the benefits and what it can bring in helping their employees get CGMA qualification. But it covers a range of topics, and obviously we will take any feedback we get from our students and stakeholders. But essentially we will cover topics such as what is FLP, for example, why we're launching it in the UK in September, what this will bring to the UK. We will also cover topics like exam technique for our students, our FAQs. We'll talk to subject matter experts on particular accounting standards, for example, or tricky topics that our students find challenging. We can look at things such as our blueprints, so how to best prepare for a case study exam. We might talk about future trends in finance and accounting. What's the next big thing? Talk about digital finance, for example. Talk to external bodies on the job market for CGMAs. Look at other emerging trends that may impact how accounting shapes itself for the future. So to build really on the future finance conversations that CIMA has led for many years now. So that's just a range of what we'll cover. Obviously, these will be shaped by our audience and other stakeholders as we move forward.
That's why we thought the Finance Leadership Podcast as the new identity of what will soon be the former Go Beyond Disruption podcast. It seems to make sense because so many of our listeners will find this professional level information, the topics we talk about, the future that they're focused on, to be very much a match. What we used to talk about and what we will be talking about as Go Beyond Disruption becomes the Finance Leadership Podcast in the future. So really, as you were saying, we still continue to focus on the latest information and news valuable to the profession, certainly with a global impact, but certainly, as you said, Kevin, with a focus on the UK. Is that correct? But still be relevant to global finance professionals.
Oh, yes. Obviously, we may talk about the UK, Kyle, in the earlier series, because we are launching FLP into the UK market in September. So this is just quite timely for that. And look, questions people will have will be around, what does this bring to the market? Why are you launching it in the UK now? Why have you not launched before? Will be also a question. So we will use that opportunity to give people the information and questions they've asked and continue to ask on social media, for example.
And when people ask about timing, we always say, well, there's no time like the present. And we are recording this in summer 2022, but these episodes will be coming out from September. That's when you launch. And that will be the start of when the FLP, the Finance Leadership Podcast, starts to appear in everyone's podcast feeds as well. So that'll be twice a month. We're looking to put episodes out on the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays of every month. And the first episode will come out on the 14th of September, though, Kevin, we were talking about the fact that we might bring another teaser episode before then. You never know. But the important news as well, of course, and I did say this at the beginning, is there will be two voices, not just one. So they'll hear me, they'll hear you, often flying solo, sometimes together. So what type of people do you think over the first month or two you'll be talking to?
We should be talking to, as I mentioned, people within the organisation and the association. First of all, when we discuss elements of the UK, We'll be looking to speak to partners, organisations that we work with, subject matter experts, some of our personnel involved in examinations. So a wide range of people. And also what we probably will bring into the fold is to hear from our students. So I think it's important people hear on what the experience has been with FLP to date, how it's worked for them, things to be aware of. So a range of people, but I think we'll bring interesting people with views and angles on generally the world of accounting and finance and how that relates to a different way to learn and a different way to get your CGMA qualification.
Great. Looking forward to it. And if you are listening to this right now and asking, right now, what do I have to do in order to make sure that I keep getting the FLP Finance Leadership podcast, which is going to be starting in September? Well, the answer is you don't have to do much at all. In fact, you don't have to do a thing except stay subscribed, keep following us. Just as you were doing for the Go Beyond Disruption podcast, you just keep doing exactly that. You'll see in September, the artwork for the podcast will change. You'll see the title change. So it will now reflect and be named as FLP, the Finance Leadership Podcast. The show information will change as well. And in summary, it'll remind you that the FLP podcast will concentrate on the latest information on the finance leadership program as a pathway to your CGMA qualification, as Kevin has just laid out. And you'll be hearing two voices, not one, from time to time. The big thing, don't have to do anything extra. You'll see the changes happen automatically in your podcast app or wherever you are listening. And the new episodes will start appearing as they are published, twice a month from September this year, 2022. So, Kevin, thank you so much. You and I look forward to an exciting new chapter with our global audience as we become FLP, the Finance Leadership Podcast, in September. Till then, cheerio.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond Disruption, brought to you by the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. Learn more about today's topic at AICPA-CIMA.com/disruption. This podcast is designed to provide illustrative information with respect to the subject matter covered and does not represent an official opinion or position of the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants or any of its subsidiaries or affiliates. It is provided with the understanding that the association, its affiliates, and subsidiaries are not engaged in rendering legal, accounting, or other professional services. If such advice or expert assistance is required, the services of a competent professional person should be sought. The association, its subsidiaries, and affiliates make no representations, warranties, or guarantees as to and assume no responsibility for the content or application of the material contained herein and expressly disclaim all liability for such damages arising out of the use of, reference to, or reliance on such material.